Annelies, greetings from Oxford. Hello. I'm actually in London. It's really, really rainy today, very grey. But for webinars, it's great because when it's grey, there's no changes in light, so I don't have to worry about curtains and stuff. So a bit less energy, but yeah, just a little bit. Yeah, and Oxford's also very grey. Thanks, Annelies. Annelies, did you get your cup of tea? Great, good. Well, I think we are going to make a start. I make it on the hour and Annelies has got her cup of tea. So if anyone else wants to be grabbing something to accompany them and us as we go through the webinar, you are most welcome. So an official welcome to this webinar on Visible Teamwork, how to sustainably support your remote team. My name, if we haven't met before, is Pilar Orti, and I'm the director of Virtual Not Distant. And there I help managers transition their teams to remote. We used to do this in a more paced fashion, but yeah, we're as frantic as everyone else at the moment. So we help managers transition teams to remote through consulting, training, and facilitation. We call it collaborative consulting, whatever is needed. I'm also the host of the 21st Century Work-Life podcast, where we talk about leading remote teams, online collaboration, and working in distributed organizations. So if you're a podcast listener, you can find the 21st Century Work-Life podcast in all podcast apps. And for those of you who prefer to read, we have really well-crafted show notes by my colleague Maya Middlemiss over at virtualnotdistant.com. So today's webinar, well, it's about finding a way of supporting our team, of leading our team in a way that doesn't involve being in meetings for a lot of the time. I think what's happened, especially for new managers or people who haven't been in that remote space before, we've all gone into lots of meetings because that's what we're used to. We're used to real-time communication. So in order to guide you away from that, I'm going to be sharing the principles of visible teamwork, which really are a collection of interactions that you probably want to be having in a remote team. And I'm also going to be covering how you might adapt your leadership style and your behavior in the online space to enable your team to do their best work. So that's the thinking behind this. If I can start a little bit about where I am, just to also to place the work and also why I've decided to concentrate on this. So as I was saying, I'm the director of Virtual Not Distant, and I started to look at leadership in the online space about 5 years ago now. I was a leadership trainer, of course I still am, and I was thinking, where are the gaps? Where are the gaps for me to come into this space and have a chance of differentiating myself? And I noticed that there were, well, global teams were becoming more common, not just in big corporations, but also in smaller startups, new businesses, because technology was becoming so accessible. So things like Zoom were around already, and people were seeing actually it's not that hard now to collaborate with people across the world, and we can have that sense of connection. So for all that time until March this year, I was advocating for an office optional approach, and also just to say online meetings can be really good. We never said that they're the same as being in person because they're completely different contexts. There's benefits and there's differences to both, but you can connect through them. So that was until then. And then, of course, this year, what we saw was everyone shifting, all the knowledge workers shifting to remote during the pandemic and going mainly to meetings. So my tune has changed, as have many others in the space. And really now I'm trying to, I'm asking people to think about how to use the online space to communicate in non-real time, so asynchronous communication. So I would like to encourage you throughout this webinar to have your mind in what other ways of communicating have we got that do not involve real time, mainly meetings, and what your ecosystem is like within which you operate. And I also invite you to be asking yourself questions all the time. What do I think about this? How comfortable do I feel with this kind of communication? Do these principles sit well with me? Are they relevant to my team? All of those questions, I invite you to be asking yourself all those questions throughout. So when I'm talking about asynchronous communication, I'm talking about communication that is cloud-based, non-real time. So something that doesn't happen in our personal computers, but in a shared space. Usually we use a different number of platforms. You can connect between them. This is the most important one, is there is no expectation of an immediate reply. So I'm not talking about using the chat like now. If I say something, sorry, if you say something, there will be a slight delay, but the expectation is that I will reply to you quite quickly. So I'm thinking about communication that can wait, so non-urgent. The online ecosystem then becomes the office. So when we want to look at what our collaborators are saying, our team members, we come into these platforms. And the office, when we have access to it, if we have access to it, if we need it, the office just becomes one more collaboration tool, which is great for synchronous communication. So this is what I mean by asynchronous communication. And throughout the talk, throughout the webinar, I will be showing some tools, but I've decided not to go into any depth, because as soon as we start talking about the technology, all our attention goes there. And what's really difficult is the human connection, making the human connection work. But I didn't know who was going to come to the webinar. I don't know some of you, so I don't know where you're at. So I thought sometimes we need to see what this communication looks like. So I will be sharing some examples. So visible teamwork, it's something I've been talking about and thinking about for a couple of years now, and it's evolving all the time. Every time I talk about it, it evolves. So thank you for being here, because because you're helping me to think. And this is a set of collaboration principles for the online space. They are things that we can adapt regardless of the makeup of our team, what technology we have. So they're not best practices. They're even before that, they're principles. They, from a leadership point of view, what you need to start thinking is about how you design your ecosystem for team interactions. So if you think about leadership and management practice, we've always thought about, okay, how do we make sure people talk in meetings? How do we make sure everyone's ideas are shared? And it's very similar principle when we go into the asynchronous online space. We're still looking at interactions. This is about interacting with team members. And you as a team leader, or as someone who wants to have some ownership of the team, you can look at designing what are the best places to have what interactions. And then we need to start shifting our way of leading. So the online space, and if you look at distributed companies, companies that have been distributed online since the beginning, like Automatic, like Buffer, they thrive on their leaders being very facilitative. And by that, what I mean is that the focus is on enabling everyone to do their work together. And that's the main point. Of course, we set vision, we have vision. Of course, we set goals. Of course, we give feedback. We do everything we associate with really good leadership and management. However, we also focus on how can we get the team to work, to self-organize as much as possible, and to enable people to do their best work autonomously. And the online space has always been great for this. And this is why I came into this space. This is what's exciting about this space. So this is visible teamwork. So what we're, and I always laugh because it's my, the facilitative leadership is that little thing that, okay, we have to get there, more flatter organizations, more self-organization. So the way in which I've designed the talk, I'm going to talk you through the principle. So visible teamwork is divided into 3 parts, but I'll talk through the principles. Then I'll give you some examples of what it might look like with some online tools. And then I'll spell out the leadership applications and considerations. But really, I think all the way through, you can be asking yourself, okay, would this be applicable for our team? Does the work of our team, would it benefit from this? What are our tasks? What interactions do we need? So this is an overview of visible teamwork. And as I said, we can split it into 3 parts. One is deliberate communication, which is about the information that gets lost about the individual when we don't see each other often. And this deliberate communication, when we are in an online meeting, we probably communicate a lot of this, or there is space for us to talk about some of this stuff. But if we're not meeting as very often, then there is some stuff about the person that we might lose. There's also the concept of planned spontaneity. which is about those interactions that give us some joy because we didn't know they were going to happen. And they're very difficult to happen in the online space. We have to plan for them. It's an oxymoron. And of course, work visibility, which is about everything we need to know about the work to help us work better together. There's loads of stuff there. So you can see that deliberate communication and planned spontaneity are a bit smaller than work visibility. You will notice that in the material. So deliberate communication really is about the person, planned spontaneity is about building team spirit, and work visibility is about the work. In addition to this, and this is something I'm just going to touch on now, but then I'm going to leave it because this is a whole other subject and one more for consultancy than a webinar because of the complexity, is you can see the arrows going out there away from the team to the outside world, and arrows coming in are from the outside world into the team. Something that I am hearing now is that managers and team leaders, they're kind of starting to work out how to get the team to feel connected, but it's the bigger organizational piece in bigger organizations that's difficult. How do we stay connected to the rest of the organization? So I'm just dropping that here because you must not forget that if you work in an organization or in a very large team, because then, so you can see it's all quite fluid. So just leaving that one with you. So all throughout, be thinking about, if I want to introduce anything here, then set it up as experiments, small things, try something out, have a deadline where you stop doing something. If you're going to try things out, what should you stop doing? So my big message in a way of this talk is, if we start to introduce some of these visible teamwork practices asynchronously, then we should reduce the real-time communication, probably some meetings, some. And that takes me to the third point, balance asynchronous and synchronous, whatever that balance means to you. Some teams, for example, academics, might not need much real-time communication, but some teams in operations might want to check in twice a day. I was talking to someone the other day who was saying she'd always struggled at being part of a virtual team in the past because she felt very disconnected from the team. But now that everyone is working in this way and that everyone is more comfortable with the technology, they're checking in with their team twice a day. I was like, oh, wow, that's a lot for me because I'm not used to that. But for some people, that's what they need. So it's really about balancing. And a lot of the principles here can be applicable to both asynchronous and synchronous, but I encourage you to look at them through the asynchronous lens. So deliberate communication. So what kind of information do we need to know from each other as people? Well, one is how available we are. And this goes beyond whether you can meet. It goes, it's about, well, are you doing deep work at the moment? So can I interrupt you? Are you free for a quick chat? Or actually, do you just want to not be disturbed unless urgent for 4 hours? So again, this is something that everyone's done in some way or other in the organization, but I think that now we can use your calendars in a more creative way, or we can just check in. We can just check in with each other once a day or once every week if we're freelancers. It really depends. One way, for example, that a company called Infinite Red does that, does this checking in. So they're about 40 people fully distributed in different time zones, and they don't have fixed working hours. So if you have fixed working hours, you know that you're available in some shape or form all the time, during set times. But it might be that you've got more of a flexible schedule. So Infinite Red, how they do it, they have one Slack channel where this is all they do. So Slack is a big chat room where you can have segmented conversations, very much like Microsoft Teams. Some of you might be more familiar with that. And in this channel, all that people do is just say when they are around. That's it. And they say they're going for lunch, whatever. And that's all. So they have a very, very specific way of doing this. It works very well for them. It could be that you use your calendars for this. It really depends. Another thing that might be missed if we can't see people is their mood and state of mind, which of course, if I'm not feeling very well today, then it's good for you, my manager, to know, because you have a piece of feedback that actually needs to wait until I'm feeling a little bit better. And this is not big things that are happening with us, because sometimes this is private, or usually we know about them as managers. These are more like a day-to-day thing. You know, today I'm not feeling that well, or I had a terrible morning. It's that kind of thing. And again, we can share this very easily through a channel in an online collaboration application, or even in an email at the beginning or in the middle of the day. Or we can decide, you know what, we'll just share it when we need to. But you have to agree to have done that. Then the context, we know, is very important. And I've got two bits of context here for you. One is the individual, which is about what's happening at home with us, because things happen. We know that. And some days we've got more stuff going on around us. If we're a global team, this becomes even more important. This becomes more important. So we need a way of communicating this. And the other bit of context that might get lost if we don't deliberately bring it into the team is the context within which the team operates. And this is crucial for you if you are leading a team, or if you're really nurturing the team, or if you're a manager, because you probably will have more information or ad hoc conversations with other people about things that are happening in the organization, but your team members are likely not doing that. And then you have the danger of them feeling isolated from the rest of the organization. Having a set process and a set way and deliberately communicating this in your team can help you all to just feel a little bit more aligned, a little bit more within the organization. Got some examples here of jobs, training, budgets, or initiatives. Those are some of the things. You can also bring gossip in. You know that gossip is a great way of understanding what people are doing. There might be things you've heard that you think that are not confidential. I'm not saying confidential stuff, but that are important for your team to know, or that they're just interesting and will help them feel more connected. So again, here I've got actually this person talking during a meeting about that. That could be something, but you can also have a space in your ecosystem where you do this. Again, it could be an email every 2 weeks where you sit down and go, okay, what have I learned over the last 2 weeks about what's going on in the organization that could be of interest to my team? Or it could be that you have a space in a collaboration platform, or even a Google Doc, an online document that you can easily go to and update. And those are really the 4 things. We're talking availability, mood and state of mind, your personal context of the people in the team, and the organizational context. Because what you need to understand is what affects how you show up at work, and what might other people need to know about that. So if you have a lot of real-time contact, a lot of this stuff, you just pick it up subconsciously almost, or in little snippets of conversation, tone of voice, visual, facial expressions. But if you're starting to move into a more independent way of working with your team, just so that we don't have so much real-time meeting time online, then you might want to consider some of this. And leading through this is about establishing regular patterns of communication, because we can check in every day via meeting, but we can also check in every day in another way. But it gives us a regular pattern. Some teams and some team members will really benefit from just feeling connected. But instead of saying, hi, how are you? We might decide that we communicate if anything has changed in our context or our availability for the day. Sometimes it's easier to communicate something specific. You as someone looking after the team might notice when patterns are broken. So for example, maybe someone checks in every day and with like 3 or 4 lines, really chatty, and then that starts to change. It maybe starts to pare down, or there's less information. That gives you something to notice. That's something that you might not be able to see or hear, but you notice it. Of course, I always get the example from many people in the workshops when I'm talking about this, who say, yeah, but usually we have more one-to-ones and we communicate more with them. We know what's happening in our team. then you don't need this. However, if the way in which you're working means that you are a little bit disconnected from each other, you will need more of this. You can also, by what people are sharing, you can notice what matters to them. And from this, you can write it down, make a note. What matters to people? What are they communicating and what are they not? And that can help you to build a little bit more of a personal relationship with your team members. But of course, keep checking in individually and just remember to bring in that context from the organization as much as possible to your team deliberately. So we're going to have a look at work visibility. So I just remind you that we're really looking at collaboration principles and how you as team leader might want to design for those interactions, and this aspect of facilitative leadership. We're trying to get our team to connect and work together as best as they can. So get ready because work visibility is a big one. And for this one, some stuff will apply to you, some stuff will not, some will be overkill, something will be really useful. So you really need to understand. You see, when you start to work in this way, you really have to understand how your team works, the nature of the work, and what interactions you need. So it's really, really incredible reflection exercise for you and for your team to start to think about this. So visible workflow is about exactly that. What is being done in the team, at what progress the tasks have, and when things are done. And I'm going to show you how this can look. So this is one of the, well, this is a very popular tool with smaller organizations, and that's their focus, Basecamp. Basecamp have to-dos. And the thing is, well, this is just a to-do list. Yes, it is, but it's open for the whole team. And the whole team can work on it and the whole team can view it, which is great for the manager because this means that the team members are being accountable to each other and they're sharing the information of the progress with each other, not just with you. It's much stronger. That is, I will be sharing the slides with you, so don't worry if you want to make further notes on this. It can also, there's also other applications. My favorite one is Trello, which is, it's more than a to-do list, and Planner if you have the Microsoft Teams ecosystem. So again, it's all about being able to see what is going on, who's doing what as well. So we've got that, we've got the visible workflow. And the great thing with the visible workflow, of course, is that, as I say, if you want to know if something's been done, you can go there and look as a manager. Your supervisor hat can be a little bit more invisible. And then you can see when things change also. So the second part, another aspect of work visibility is open conversations. And by this, I mean taking exactly that, more conversations to a place where the whole team can see them. The team, not I'm talking about at team level, all of this. And this means mainly going from email to Microsoft Teams, Slack, other collaboration platforms, or you'll see other examples also. And this is about having, for example, if I want to have a conversation with Teresa, who's here in the webinar, and I can send her an email. But that means that whatever I'm talking about in that email, like it might be a question about something, it might be something I've learned. Why not? Maybe Teresa wants to know about it. It does mean that everyone else in the team does not get access to that information. The information could be useful for them, they could have something to add, etc. So even though I only want to talk to Teresa, I still put it in a place where everyone else can see it in case it's of interest. You can see that you need agreements around this. I'm not going to go into any detail about the team agreements, but you can see that you need agreements about response time, how involved we want to be in each other's conversations, how you make sure that Teresa sees the message, even if, I don't know, Annalise and Peter can't. So you need to be agreeing all the time. You cannot, which is one of the problems, is we've had to go straight into this space without agreeing how we're going to use it. So if you take one thing from this webinar, is that you must agree how to use this in your team. So open conversations, as I was saying, might look like this. This is, we have a small team in Virtual Not Distant, but we talk always, we don't use email unless it's something that requires, for whatever reason, an official record or whatever. There's always room for that, of course. You can see that Slack is segmented by topic, because this is not WhatsApp. We're not going and just talking, we decide where we talk where. So we'll go into one room to talk about the podcast. We'll go into another room to talk about one client. We'll go into another room to talk about another client. So we know where to find the information. But most of the channels are open. And this is the same with Microsoft Teams, the discussion aspect. You know that Microsoft Teams has the video conferencing, but it's got the discussion area. Open conversations benefit from threads. So learn how to thread and get used to threading. What I mean by that is that we're not, if I start a conversation with my friend Kate about the website, and then my colleague Maya comes into the same channel and talks about some specific element of the website, and then we come back, the conversations get very messy. If we start to thread, you can see, don't know if you can see on where the arrow is coming from something that says 11 replies. So someone who comes into this channel to join us can look and say, oh, that sounds interesting. Let me look at those 11 replies, and they're threaded. And if they want to add something about that, they can add in the thread. They don't have to go to the bottom. So it's just easy. You need to learn how to use that if you're going to go into this form of communication. You can also have open conversations as near to the work as possible, because if you start using tools for visible workflow, those also allow you to have conversations. And that's what you need to be learning as well, is to have conversations as near to the work as possible. So this is a card with mainly the engineer of the podcast, Ross. I could look at what he's done and then send him an email and say, when do you know? But that's taking me away from the work. Do it in the work, in the task. So again, you can have open conversations in this way. And of course, you can have open conversations in documents you're working on. So this is an example of Google Docs, which is the new Google Workplace, they're now called. But of course, Word in Microsoft 365 have the same thing. And this is, again, it really depends on the culture of your team and how comfortable people are with open conversations. But for example, instead of giving feedback to someone by email or in a one-to-one on a document, you can see if giving some of that feedback in the open, if that is suitable, if that can help someone else, or if might help someone else understand the document a bit better and be more involved. So even someone in your team might not have been involved in creating the document. By looking at the conversations, they understand a little bit more the thinking around it. And this is just an example of the same thing in Microsoft Teams. So you can see there's a lot to take in if you are not used to this form of working, but you can also see that I hope that immediately you will have gone, oh, too much. Oh, perfect. Oh, yeah, I could really do with that. The other aspect, and this really depends on how you work, is visible work. How much of your work can you make visible to other people? And this is not just about alignment. This is not just about productivity. This is also about connection. We're trying to find the different points that people can connect in an asynchronous manner. Because if I haven't seen you for a while and we have 2 meetings a week, but we have very strict agenda because there's lots of stuff to discuss, I might feel a bit like I don't know what you're doing anymore. And if I want to, then I can maybe look at one of your documents, maybe it's a work in progress and that's okay in the team, or I can go and look, as we were talking about, at a conversation or see the progress of our tasks. I can do that in my own time when I've got the need, when I'm ready, rather than always having to wait for the real-time meeting. So I think also think of ways in which you can facilitate your team members and yourself, ways of them feeling connected through the work. And this is what visible teamwork is about. So if you can make any of your work visible, then that helps. And as important, sometimes more than the visible work, is the visible thinking. What are people thinking that they don't get to share because they're away from each other and not connected in real time? And for that, it always helps to have a framework. So I want to share this framework with you. So if you think, for example, that in your team you are, say you're a team that has a lot of cross-organizational work. So you work together, but actually most of you work with other people in the organization, and then you come together to make sure that the collaborations are going okay. So for example, a human resources department, actually, that's quite a good example. You're working with lots of people. and you start to feel disconnected and you don't want to add another meeting. Well, once a week, you could, in an email, that's fine if you go around the team, the email, or better still in a collaboration platform or a Google Doc, you decide to share one thing. It could be a decision that you made, or an insight you had, or a result you achieved, or an emotion you felt, a contact you made, some trouble you had, or some thanks that you want to give to your team. And this just helps you to think, okay, what might be of interest to my team? So just also framing sometimes the thinking so that we can then communicate it might help with that connection. And I've got to thank Johan Lilich for this framework initially. I added the thanks from freistil.it. And also remember that it's not all about text, because some people actually might prefer not to be typing all day. And this is one of the reasons why we might have gone away from using these applications to stay connected. You can take photos, you can draw sketches and take photos. You can leave audio messages. On the right, at the bottom right, I've put a little screenshot of one of my friends. This is a friend who I talked to on Slack. And she's left me an audio message and she's taken some photos. So again, it's finding, and for you as person introducing this or looking after your team, role model this, encourage people. If somebody goes during a talk, a one-to-one with you, and they say, oh, look what notes I've made, and they show you something, and you think, that'd be great. Oh, great. Why don't you share that with the team? Just take a quick picture, because it brings back the humanity. Handwriting, especially, even seeing handwriting in a photo reminds us, okay, these people express themselves in different ways. So start experimenting with that. I have to say that that's the one thing that collaboration platforms are not giving us a lot, is a lot of flexibility in the medium. It's mainly text, but we can start to experiment. And of course, you could also bring this visible thinking to your meetings. It could be that you decide that you're going to do your status meetings or your catch-ups as a team through the visible workflow, and that gives you time. So when you've got real-time communication, you can really be meeting with each other and really talk about the things that are going on in your mind, the learnings, etc. And this, I'm touching on it, but it's very important. And we also need to find ways as team leaders and managers of making our teams visible. And there's the obvious ones, trying to find where the cross-organizational initiatives are, making sure team members know about it, all of that. But also, what small things can we do? And one thing that lands really, really well when I talk about this to people is using your email signature creatively. So, for example, if your team is working on a project they're really proud of and they're taking a lot of time through it, you could write this month, my project. So you have your name and your signature. My name would be Pilar Orti, Director of Virtual and Distant, or even before that. So Pilar Orti, our team is working really hard at the moment on developing a service on podcasting for connection for organizations. And that when people in the organization, whoever catches sight of that, hey, oh, that's interesting. Or our team is working, our team has developed a new way of working online. Talk to us about it if you want. Also, what is it that you're learning? Or we've currently learned a lot about X. Let me know if you want to know more. So find things. I mean, the signature in an email is such an underused tool. So what are the creative ways that we can think of to make our team visible? So I invite you to think, what does your team need right now? What is it? Is it the visible workflow? Do you need to have more conversations in the open? Is it the thinking that you're like, you know what, we see the work and everyone's being very productive, haven't got a clue what anyone's learned in the last 2 months. And then, of course, the work, if you can make it visible, and the team visibility. And for you, this is all about leading by example. Whatever you decide that you want to explore in the team that is going to benefit the team, you're going to have to role model it. So choose something that you really need and that you're going to be able to role model, and help to adopt the technology, because everyone has been thrown into it. And sometimes we struggle and we don't want to be a burden, so we don't say anything. Direct your attention to what matters, because one of the dangers of having all this information available to you is that you're going to go a little bit crazy around it. You're going to get distracted. You're going to be distracted by some conversations. You're going to want to solve all the problems that they're working out in an open conversation. Takes real discipline, especially if by nature you're a troubleshooter. So really keep your coaching hat on, ask questions when you can rather than give solutions, and ignore some of the stuff that's going on. Really, you will need to learn how to direct your attention and also let team members get on with it. It's a little bit like hearing two team members talking next to you and wanting to butt in. No, let them get on with it. This is really difficult skill, but it can be learned. And then introduce one thing at a time. What's more important to us? What suits our workflow best? And then when you are looking at what's working and not, notice what kind of interaction people are having and adjust so people connect better. So I'm going to leave that with you. That's a quite meta. And then always move conversations that need to be real time to real time. Don't be afraid of saying, guys, this thread has gone on for really long. We need to schedule a meeting. Or we've tried to, the feedback we're giving each other on this document, it's not clear. Let's have a conversation in real time. Finally, we've got planned spontaneity, which of course we've learned about the virtual coffees in real time. Everyone's adopted those. Some people are getting tired from them. We might want to have a water cooler place, for example, a channel in Microsoft Teams or in Slack or even WhatsApp if you want to have a water cooler. But think about theming it. Think about finding topics that you can theme that conversation because sometimes we connect more when we know specifically about what we're talking. So it might be something that's informal, something that's more socially connected. But what are topics do you think that your people might be interested in? Is it a book? Is it talking about books? Is it about films? Is it about what's going on in the industry? Because of course, social is not always sometimes it's work related, and we can have informal conversations around social, around work stuff as well. And sometimes we miss that. Some of us will miss more the informal conversations around work than the social, purely social chat. So think about also what might be missing. Might be missing celebrations. That's something you can capture asynchronously. Kudos to someone else, capturing that asynchronously. And the reason that I suggest you have a space so you can do it immediately is that so that people can be spontaneous in giving. Then of course the receiving is less spontaneous. But if something great has happened today and I want to really share it, but I have to wait 2 days for our meeting, or I have to pick up the phone for someone, to everyone in my team, 20 people, maybe it's easier to put it in an asynchronous space. I've done it when I needed to. And then other people can receive it when they're ready. So think about how you can construct the online space. And thank you to Mark Kilby for this tip around really designing those informal conversations around stuff, around topics, because there might be more engagement. Also look for those small things, like make sure your profile is in your applications, that people, when they see that you're there, like for example in Google Docs, you see if someone else is working on something at the same time, or someone's on the collaboration tool with you. See their photo. It's these small moments of connection. So you can maybe pop in if you're working on slides and my friend, or you can see that someone's typing. It's all these moments of connection. Where are they? And direct your attention to them as team leader. Let the team members know that this is happening. They might not know. They might not have noticed that this is happening in their tools. And finally, and this takes me right back to the beginning, when we're talking about deliberate communication, find a way of communicating your availability in your team, because if we are afraid of disturbing someone, we won't be spontaneous. So if I don't know whether you're in deep thought because I can't see you, or I don't know whether you're struggling with something and therefore don't want a quick phone call, then I won't disturb you. So I think this is especially important for managers. So I think really for this, we really need to understand what matters to team members that's not a core part of their work. And also what else do they need to know about one another? And then we can start designing those coffee channels, both synchronously and asynchronously. And we can start exploiting every opportunity for connection by understanding where those small things are. So as you can see from the time, we are wrapping up. So for planned spontaneity, and also this goes into the whole visible teamwork. Informal and social doesn't always mean fun in inverted commas. Some people are really missing having conversations about stuff that matters to them with team members, but it's not always socially, it's not always like lots frothy. Sometimes they want to talk about values or some decisions they're having to make. And of course, people connect in different ways. We need to remind ourselves of this. Leading by example is very important, and making a lot of the planned spontaneity stuff voluntary. Sometimes as leaders also, we have to show up even if it doesn't work for us, because it's just about supporting others. So I think that's worth remembering. When does our showing up really mean something? And I think some of these more informal things are very valuable. So we've looked at all of this: deliberate communication, planned spontaneity, and work visibility. The main thing is, what interactions do you need to have in your team, and what information do you need to be sharing? Those are the core questions. And then design. Don't get distracted by the tools because it's not about, oh, shall we use Trello? No, it's about, do we need to know the progress of our tasks? Do we need to have conversations within the task in a way? Okay, well then Trello might be interesting. So really it's about how shall we stay in touch and updated, not how shall we use the app. I think this is very important. And also just a word of warning that sometimes the way in which tools are designed might shift how you work. So just be aware of that. Sometimes it might be a good thing, but sometimes it's not the desired outcome. And finally, remember to switch off, because the problem, of course, with a lot of this communication is that it's there all the time. So notifications and the team agreement is really, really important. Have you got, I'm very happy to open the microphone if you're still around. Yeah, a lot of you are still around. That's nice. But if you have any questions or any reflections, I'm very happy to give you the microphone, or the chat is open to everyone. Annalise, she's just sent it to me. So Annalise is saying just digesting. It is a lot to digest. And I think that's a really important word. And I'm just going to go back to something that is incredibly important, is that if you have gone through this transition to sudden remote, you must take time to reflect. This is one of the things I'm doing with a lot of teams, is that first thing they need to do is reflect. What have we been doing? What have we learned? What have we learned that we want to keep? Where do we want to go next? That has to come first before any training, before any looking at the next stage. And because of the suddenness of it, a lot of teams haven't done that. So digesting is a very good word. Thank you, Annalise. Any other wonderful reflections that we can share with the rest of the group? Oh, I've got a question in the question and answers. So Anish, what would be the first logical step away for companies who are suffering from back-to-back online meetings, but they don't know what to do? So the first step, Anish, if I may suggest, would be to analyze what is happening in those meetings, as in the kind of information, and then go back to, okay, is the information in the meeting, is the content of the meetings information? Is there another way to digest this? Is there any other way to communicate this? So for example, would a video recording, we haven't talked about using video in asynchronous, so that's very powerful. Do we want to, are we having a meeting just to report something? Well, won't a video be better, or an audio, or a report? And then make sure that you express the importance of consuming that content, of course, because the reason sometimes we have meetings is because we know people show up and listen, whereas if we give them stuff to read, view, listen to, they might not do so. So that's the beginning of a culture change. I think the other thing, one reflection I heard once, is that sometimes people show up to meetings because they don't feel visible. So instead of declining an invitation to a meeting, I will say yes, just because I think I ought to be there. I need to show my face. So starting to think about other ways in which teams and people can be visible within the organization, like a team newsletter, like more themed coffees across the organization, what else we got? Like once every 3 months, a team actually does a video showcasing their work or something. So sometimes it's about, we're missing being seen, and that's why we turn up to meetings. And then for teams, so more specific, then see, is the workflow? Are we just catching up on what we're doing? Well, let's see if we can put something else. So I hope that started to answer. You did send a thank you, Anish. I hope that starts to answer, but it's really, really complex. But I think the first step needs to be, what is happening in those meetings, and can we move some of those interactions or information to another one? Okay, so that one answered live. Oh, done. Okay. Any other thoughts, questions, even if it's single words that come to mind? That's always also very insightful. Oh, here we go. I've got something. Great. Okay, so Teresa has shared something also with attendees. So I invite you to read it if you prefer. In fact, I'll just give you like 2 seconds to read it, and then I'll read it out. Yes. So, so Teresa's saying, I think the spontaneity is especially interesting right now, and which is looking mainly at asynchronous. The asynchronic topics like films or books, so having asynchronous topics around that. I think people are tired of Zoom happy hours, but want to stay connected. We may not associate asynchronic with fun, but you have offered another perspective. So thank you very, very much, Teresa. So that's what I was hoping, another perspective. Well, thank you very, very much. Virtualnotdistant.com is the website to get in touch. And I just want to thank you for your time again, either on video if you've been watching, or I hope you've rested your eyes a little bit, and for all your thoughts. So thank you very much.